Well, guys, like Greg said, he just took half of my talk today about us completing our 5th year and starting our 6th year. I remember when we started this, how we weren't going to last more than a couple weeks. But I think over the years it's been a Jesus thing, and that's why it's lasting. It has nothing to do with us, but all with Him. And that's why we're here today. Rudy sparked some memories today. Again, thank Rudy for coming out and doing worship, and Johnny also. Thank you very much. Always a thrill to have you here. But to be thankful for what you have. You know, there was a great commercial for Christmas this year. And I'm sure you guys have seen it. If you haven't, you don't know what I'm talking about. But this guy wakes up out of bed in the commercial, and everything is wrapped. You know, he opens up this present, and it's his shoes, and he puts his shoes on. And he goes out, and everything that he's doing in the morning, I even think his family's wrapped, his kids are in presents, and they tear out of this paper, and he goes outside in his car. He goes, I have a car! This is so awesome! And he opens it up and this is so great. But to be thankful for everything you have, we have so much. And sometimes we need to slow down and just be thankful for what we have. But when Rudy was talking about that, I thought of that commercial. So today, my title of today, which is going to include my testimony and maybe a review of what's happened to me in 2017 as part of my testimony. But it is, He doesn't call the equipped, He equips the called. And I was talking to Al a little bit this morning. When we got here and the facility was dark, I'm like, did they close down today or something? Or, you know, no lights were on, no one was here. I go, well, maybe we won't be having breakfast today. Maybe we'll be going somewhere else. But the lights did come on, and Mario came out and helped us. But I feel that's such a true statement, because until I personally took a step of faith to think that I was always that person in the background saying, it's not going to be me because I'm not equipped enough to do anything about it. So the start of my testimony, as far as just being an average kid, being out of a family that did not go to church, that sent us to church when we were little kids, and we found video games at that time at the local donut shop, to using the money my mom gave us, the $1 or $2, to buy a donut and play 4 video games or whatever for a quarter each. That was my exposure to church up until my wife was pregnant with our first son, and thought, God, it would be great for him to go to church. That's probably what he needs. Not us, but him, you know. So we'll start him going to church, you know. So in 2008, I went to my first men's retreat, and it was definitely a life-changing experience to me, but it was an experience that was going to be doubled and tripled fold in the near future to come. So that night, when I was there, the pastor brought in this big old beef tongue and was talking about James and using your tongue, and I was very inspired by that. And I was the EMT, because this facility required you to have an EMT there. So I got to have my own little quarter thing. I had this quarters I could go to. And so I went in there and I prayed and said, Lord, you know, this is real, and, you know, gave my heart to Jesus that night. And I didn't feel anything. I didn't have any type of aha moment or any experience that Jesus entered my heart that night. And because He was already there. So I went on, and after that night I went home, and because of the tongue, I was pretty tough on my boys growing up. I have 3 sons, and the tongue was part of the toughness. And so, I really apologized to them and stuff, but still I never had that moment. And then the following year, I was asked to lead a Bible study after that retreat, in which I told the pastor that he was crazy, that he was talking to somebody else, and it wasn't going to be me. And it ended up being me, and it ended up being a 6-week study, which I thought was going to be crazy. 6 weeks. That I could never do that. I could never hold it together for 6 weeks to have guys come to my house. That ain't going to happen. So every excuse in the book. Nevertheless, we did start meeting, and that was in 2009, and that was the birth of No Man Left Behind in our ministry. Because from that Bible study, started this breakfast and many other things that we've done over the years that a lot of you guys are familiar with. Some may not be. A few years ago, I was praying and I was thinking about, Lord, I feel like you know, I was having doubts. Like, I don't know, you guys probably don't have that. Maybe it's just me. But I was having doubts, and the Lord revealed to me that it was not that day at the men's retreat, but it was years before that, 1984, matter of fact, when I was going into my senior year, that one of my buddies that I'm still friends with, not here today, took me to Calvary Chapel Downey for it was like a Thursday night, actually it was a Friday night after a football game. This church had opened after football games to give kids a different choice instead of going to a party and drinking and stuff, which I normally would take the power drinking and the beer bonging over going to the church and having free pizza, you know. But that particular night, for whatever reason, I went to that, and he revealed to me that he did come into my heart that night, and he brought that memory back to me because I had forgot all about it. But I remember laying in bed after that event and accepting Jesus into my heart and having an experience like almost like a dream where, you know, I just felt so empowered and almost like an out-of-body experience. And I had forgot about that because I didn't relate that to Jesus in my life. So fast forward now back, I'm like, man, I did have that experience. And that is part of my testimony, and I have to share that. So I did have that moment in my life when he showed me, no, Doug, I was with you. I've been with you since then. And then this light bulb turned on in my head going, man, so all those days where I woke up in front of my house after like a total binge of drinking and got home safely in my car, he was with me. And it was the corny footsteps poem, right? How when there's only the one set of footsteps is because he's carrying you. Well, that was my whole life from probably 1984 till about 2008. That was the case, that he'd been carrying me all that time, because all that time up until that point, well, maybe a little bit before 2008, but all that time was, you know, drinking, partying. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on, you know. In my house, we were any particular Tuesday night, I had a kegerator flowing, and we were drinking and partying, and my kids were just babies running around in diapers. And my wife and I were just getting totally drunk and having a good old party time, you know. And they had school the next morning, you know. My older boy was in school, and so that was kind of the way that went, you know. And then now fast forward back again to 2009 when we started this 6-week study. I thought we were crazy. Like I said, that started in 2009, and we've been continually having this study since then. So that has been it's been really awesome. And I don't know, this breakfast wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here if that hadn't happened. And that took a step of faith. And that, to me, when I reflect on what I've done in my life, and I'm sure you guys do the same thing, when you reflect about where you've been and where you're going, where you're at that particular point, it's amazing to think what has been Jesus in my life and what has not been. And it's very simple to start a Jesus day and say, wow, I don't know how I got here alive. Nevertheless, I'm here. And to have him put men in my life that we can come together as a group and study the Word and learn the Word has been a completely life-changing experience for me. Like I said, it started this breakfast. It started Project Touch with us helping them. We're now involved in the Navigators, helping them. And there's so much more we can do, you know. And I think 2 verses that have stuck with me since I've been in the Word are James 1:22 and Isaiah 6:8. And James 1:22 is, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves, but do what it says. To me, that verse is the reason why this breakfast is here today. Because we didn't, we're studying the Word of God, and we're like, is this what we do? Just check a box? And even the Bible study, we're meeting weekly, and we're learning, and we're eager, and we're sharing together, and we're fumbling through the Word because none of us are, John always says, hey, you're the leader. I'm like, no, dude, I'm just a facilitator because I didn't know any more than anybody else in that group. But it was just at my house, and I was the one that bought the books and handed them out. But that was pretty much it. I didn't know any more, and probably a lot less than some of the other guys that were there. But we learned together, and we shared together, and we shared our stories, and we shared our testimonies. And that's what brought us together as a group. But that verse to me was the one that's like, hey, we just can't keep meeting here. We can't keep just going to Sunday church and checking that box. But we need to do what the Word says, And it was one of the studies that we did with Rick Warren where he told us to personalize it. And now that's kind of giving me the chills right now. And that verse says, Doug, don't merely listen to the Word. Doug, do what it says. It doesn't say those guys or them or the pastors or the staff at the church. No, it says you and each one of you individually to do what it says. In Isaiah 6:8, that one is, another one is, says, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And Doug said, here am I, send me. It takes us to take that step of faith. And I know that as far as preparing, and in my walk, I've met people that have been much more prepared than me, but haven't taken steps in faith. And I'm not one to judge them because I don't know where they're at. I only know where I'm at, But it seems like there's a lot of men specifically, because I think that's what I have been called to be involved with as men, is that there's a lot of men that are waiting to learn more and more and more and not taking that step of faith. And I'm here to tell you that I'm an example of that step of faith. It's been about 5 years now ago, I took on a position of a chaplain with my department. I'm a firefighter for the LA County Fire Department, for those of you guys who don't know. And then last year, January 1st, I took over the position of lead chaplain for the department. This is a department of about 3,000 firemen and another probably 4,000 civilian personnel that are support personnel that do hazardous. There's all kinds of stuff. It's a huge department. So, getting up to the point of what I wanted to share to you, what was leading all the way up to this, was that in March of last year, I've been wanting to share this with you guys, and some of you guys have probably already heard this story. In March of last year, I was laying in bed, and it was about 8, maybe even 8:30, pushing 9 o'clock. It was my day off. I was laying in bed, and my phone chirped up, and it was a text message. And I just ignored it, and if you just ignore it, it kind of goes off every few seconds just to kind of, I'm like, oh man, I'm trying to sleep in today, I've had a day off and wake up at home. That's my thing. It's like most of the time either I'm coming home from work or I'm waking up at like 4 a.m. and going to work. I don't get to wake up in my own bed, really, it seems like, to just have a nice, refreshing morning. So I looked at it, and I look at the message, and I can't believe it, what it says. And it says, hi, my name is Lindsay. I think you're my uncle. And I just got chills again right now. And so I'm like, that's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird deal, So we start kind of going back, and obviously I wake up, and I'm looking at the message, and I start texting back. Go, well, why do you think that? What makes you think that? So after we go back and forth, she goes, well, my dad is Lee, and he's your brother. And I'm like, I don't know Lee. It doesn't ring any bells, And then she said, my dad is Grayland Lee. And then the light bulbs went on. So my dad, when he was 17 years old, he lived here in Paris, went down to San Diego at the end of World War II and joined the Navy in 1944. A few years later, he met a girl from Vista area that I know now, because all this I'm reliving because I never knew this information. I knew that I had two stepbrothers that existed, but when I was a small child was the last time that I had seen them, and they had taken on their adopted, the mother, my dad and her got divorced. He stayed in the Navy for 20 years. From the story that I was told, that he stayed there to pay their child support, and they got divorced, and he stayed in until they were pretty much done. At this point, when my dad passed away maybe 7 or 8 years ago now, so he took all this to the grave with him. And so did the mother, because the mother passed also. So, okay, where am I? So Lindsay, yeah. So anyway, in that same conversation, she says, one of your brothers has died. One of your half brothers has died, and that was pretty devastating news for me. I had never met him, and never got the chance to meet him. But she said, my dad, Lee, is still alive. And they're having the funeral on Friday or Saturday coming up. And it was this conversation had begun on through text messaging for probably about an hour or two. And finally my wife says, you just need to call her, talk to her. But you could tell that it was very cautious. There's a lot of pauses in between the messaging and stuff. And so I very delicately said, well, if there's going to be a funeral, would it be okay if I came? Because obviously that family had written off my dad. They had taken the adopted father's name. And I knew I had stepbrothers, and nowadays you can just Google it, but they had changed their last name, and no one knew what that was. Not even my dad knew what that was, because I had asked him about it before. So now all this stuff's coming to light, and it was probably about 2 or 3 hours went by, and she texted me, yes, that's it, just Y-E-S, yes, and I'm like, what does that mean? Yes. Is it yes to come to the funeral, or yes, call me, yes what? So I did call her, and we started talking and stuff, and what she had done is she had drove over to her dad's house and talked to him and told him, hey, that she had contacted me, and basically got his permission for me to attend the funeral. So we talked for probably about 2 hours on the phone, and we're just talking about things. One of the funny things is that she's the only one in the family that's redhead. Well, my dad was redhead, and we're all redheads on my side of the family. My kids are redheads. Just that gene was really powerful. But she was the only redhead, so she thought she was a redheaded stepchild from the mailman or something, But I'm like, kind of confirmed that for her that she wasn't, So she was pretty happy about that. And then she took pride and think, I'm the only redhead. This is awesome, So I got invited to the funeral. Well, then I come to find out that my half-brother had served in the Air Force for 20 years. Got out of the Air Force and did some police work down in San Diego, maybe even some after he retired from that, did some border type stuff with that. So since I got invited to the funeral, I go, well, I'm going to go in my full dress uniform, just out of respect for him, And that was coming up a week later. So the day of the funeral, I'm nervous as heck just to meet the family. I've never met any of these people except for talking to Lindsay on the phone. And now at that point I had seen some pictures because Lindsay and I had exchanged some pictures and, and talked about my dad a little bit and stuff. And So I got there early. I'm a chaplain. I've done funerals. I know how it works. I'm going to get there early and just kind of hang out. I figure I'll kind of stand back and let people come in, and maybe I'll meet people as they kind of come in and see how that goes. So I'm there probably about a good hour and 15 minutes early with my family, my wife and I, and there's no one there. The funeral service, I knew where it was at because I checked in and went to the front office and checked with them, and they had cones and they had a little canopy set up, and there was only funeral in this particular cemetery. There was a little cemetery down here in Escondido. And so, but I knew nothing of the funeral or nothing of any service. I just was going to stand in the back and, go there, and hopefully I get to meet some of my family there, And so, as people came in, there was a few people that showed up, and then all of a sudden this military van comes in, and I know it's the Air Force. So they come in and they get out of their van. They park right up there, right up next to where the canopy was, and I was down a little ways. And so they're setting up their stuff, and still there's only a couple people there, and I'm like about 15 minutes to the funeral is going to start now. And all of a sudden these two officers in dress uniform come walking down towards me. And so I told my wife, go just hang out right here. I'll go see what they want because they're walking towards me. I'm in this dress uniform, so I don't know, figure I'm involved in it or whatever. So they come down and introduce themselves, and at that same time, this caravan of cars comes in, and it's all the family, carpooling together. And I said, well, I can introduce you to who I think is going to be my brother, half-brother, that is going to be probably in charge. Other than that, I don't know anybody that's going to be here, So I did that, and I went up, and it was very, very awkward because I gave him a hug, John Hartman, because I know that anybody can get a shake at McDonald's, but I gave him a hug. And it was one of those hugs that was like with his hands down, kind of like, who is this dude, I mean, I'm sure he knew who I was at that point. But still, it was very awkward, and I said, hey, brother, I love you. And that was it. He didn't say a word to me. And I said, here's the Air Force. And then I'm like, it was so awkward that I just kind of walked back and waved my wife up, and she came up, and we kind of just stood there in the back, And actually, my brother Ronnie, who died, his wife came up to me and started talking to me right away, saying, I remember you guys as kids, and she knew us. She had met us as when we were kids. So that was kind of a good icebreaker, and a few other, Lindsay, my niece who I met over the phone, came up to me, and I talked to her and her family a little bit. It was just small talk, It is a funeral service that's going to be happening, So I'm just sitting back, and I immediately know that there's something wrong. All the players are not here. It's obvious to me that people are starting to panic. And I see my brother just cross country across this cemetery to where this office is, and we're probably 100 yards away from this office area. Just cross countries. He's gone for probably about 15 minutes, and I've seen him walking back up and walks to his wife, and they have a conversation. And then he walks to his sister-in-law, and now everyone's kind of in the area where the funeral is going to be, and I'm probably about 10 yards away and kind of standing to the side, and and he walks up to his sister-in-law and has a conversation with her, and several times he kind of looks at me, and then all of a sudden he did a quarter turn and walked straight to me, and I can't remember what he said exactly to me, but what he said was, there is no one here to do the service. Would you stand up and say a few words at the service for us today, because there's no one here? Something in that regards. And I know none of these people.
Wow.
And first time I've met these people in person ever in my life, ever. And of course, no one else really knows who I am either. They still don't know who I am, except for the brother and a couple other people, and that's it. So I don't know what I said to him exactly, but there was a yes in there. like, I'm not prepared for this, but sure, I'll say a few words. And come to find out that they had booked, he was from Arizona, brought the ashes here to be in the family plot in the cemetery, had called the Air Force, but they don't do the service. They'll come there and they did a flag, they did the bugle, they did taps, but that's what they do. They don't send a representative. And if you have it at the National Cemetery now, they do say a few words, but if you don't have a chaplain or someone to do a service, that's what you get. It's a 5-minute deal, and that's over. So right at that time, I pull my handy-dandy hand computer out and Google Bible verses for funeral services, And as about the same time as when it came up, I got a backhand from my wife. Put your phone away. I'm like, honey, I got to do some work here, So I had my wife pray for me, and it's like, okay, we're already 5 minutes past the start time when he asked me. It's like, okay, Air Force, they're already all set up on the hill. They're already all in their positions. So I walk over to the who appears to be the lead person for the Air Force and said, okay, we need to come up with a little bit of order of service. What's your guys' plans? I know they're going to do taps. I know they're going to fold the flag. And I said, well, why don't you just introduce, I'll introduce you, and we will, they'll say their few words. They thank you for your years of service and those type of things. They'll fold the flag. They'll play taps, and then I'll do my part, and we'll close in a prayer. That's what we'll do. She says, okay, great, I'll wait for your key. So what was cool about it, because I kind of stepped away on this side, and the family was here, and the Air Force was over there. So when they were doing their thing, I was able to get my hand computer out again and look at some key verses to share, and I think, what am I going to say, because I'm not prepared for this. Every funeral I've ever done in my life has been weeks, if not almost a month of preparation to get this huge freight train that we do for line of duty deaths or when firemen die. There's a lot of extensive work. You work with the families and everything else. And so I don't remember. It was like, if you guys have ever seen that movie, what was it, with Will Ferrell? He does this debate thing, Old School. You guys probably never seen that because you guys aren't, I'm the only sinner here. You guys are all cool. But Old School, the movie, he gets up there and debates this guy. And at the end of it, he does this debate, and he goes, what just happened? That's kind of how this funeral service went for me that day. Because I was like, God, just give me the words. Give me the words. And the Bible verses weren't making any sense to me. I'm like, these don't even make sense to me. What am I going to say? What am I going to do? And so God just said, just speak from your heart. You're prepared I prepared you for this. And so I had an opening prayer, very short, and then I introduced myself. And that was probably and there was probably about 30 people there, including my wife and my brother, my full brother. And I think every single person in there was crying when I introduced myself, because I introduced myself that I was Ron's half-brother and that I'd never got a chance to meet him, and that today was a bittersweet day for me. And every single person that was crying, I'm like, I couldn't even hardly hold it. I'm like, I shouldn't have said that, because everyone was just weeping. And like I said, after that, I really don't know what I said, but it lasted probably about between 5 and 10 minutes. And it was very short and sweet. But after that, every single person that was there came up to me and thanked me for the service, and that they just couldn't believe that I was his brother. They just thought I was a guy there to do the service. So let me say again that God does not call the equipped, that he equips the called. And on that day, when I reflect back, I still get chills. We got invited to the reception after that, because there was no invitation sent out or anything for us. As we were driving to the reception, my wife was in tears talking to me, and I couldn't hardly stand it because she was kind of like, all that, what you've been doing since 2009 led up to this day. And all that preparation, all those things that you were doing with the Bible study and the chaplaincy program all led up to this day. And God prepared you for this day in that way. And you just never know who you're going to meet or your circumstances, but how God uses us individually in ways that we can't ever imagine. And to get that phone call or that text message to say, hey, you're my uncle, that just was the most off-the-wall thing. But up until that point, I had no contact with that family. And so it's been an amazing day. That was back in March. I've talked to them on the phone a couple times since then. We do, this. It's one of the things that's good about Facebook and those type of social media things, is you can see what people are doing, and you can kind of have a conversation through that. I had my brother over to my house one time since then for like a little family barbecue, and that worked out really cool. But this year has been a very challenging year. But I wanted to share that with you guys. And one of the things that I left out at the beginning of my testimony, that I was with my buddy Dennis, and he'd be one to attest to this if you ever want to ask him, that when I was in high school, that I would never, ever get in front of my peers to speak, ever. I was the guy in the class, I was the athlete that I would take an F on an oral assignment before I would get up, and it just wouldn't happen. It wasn't going to happen. In my senior year, my buddy Dennis and his girlfriend in a group report pretty much did the report, and the teacher gave me a generous D on the report. And I think he punished them by giving them B's because they did the whole thing, so I didn't do any of it. So, and to be here today speaking to you guys is something that was completely out of my box and completely unheard of. I even had butterflies this morning, and I had to use the restroom before I even spoke, because it's still stepping out of my box sometimes to get in front of a group and share and speak. But when you have your testimony, that's what we have, right? Every one of us here, no matter how in depth, I know we're not all Zachs, right? We don't all have that so powerful testimony that to give to people, to try to influence them. But in the same sense, we all have our testimony, and there's always someone that will hear what you have to say. No one can take that away from you. No matter how much Bible verses you have memorized, and I don't think I have any. I had to write down those ones today, even though I kind of know them. We all have our testimony, where we've been, where we're at right now, and where we're going. So with that, let's close in a prayer, guys. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together today here, Lord. Thank you for the broken yoke, for continuing supporting us. Thank you for the amazing 5 years that you've been with us, Lord. And we just are so excited for the future and what 2018 holds for us. Lord, just for those men who just need that nudge, Lord, I hope today through me that you will nudge them to take a step in faith, because we know that without our step, Lord, that or until we take that step, Lord, that you won't be with us. I know you're with us in our hearts always. You just want us to take that step of faith, Lord. Lord, just thank you for this wonderful day and this wonderful ministry. In your name we pray, amen. Thank you, guys.